I want to make sure I tell you a little bit about the folks who are with us today. In order of appearance, starting with Mildred Barya, right? Mildred, that's right. I've got this right, don't I? I take my cues. I stand on the shoulders of giants, like the moderator and host of Poetrio every month, but Mildred's reading today. So that's really nice for us. And so that's great. So let me start with Mildred Barya, a writer from Uganda and the author of 4 full-length poetry collections, most recently, The Animals of My Earth School, published this year. And we're in for a treat with that. Her prose, hybrid, and poems have appeared in Shenandoah, the Cincinnati Review, Tin House, and Prairie Schooner, for example. Now Mildred is working on a collection of creative nonfiction, and her essay entitled Being Here in This Body won the 2020 Linda Flowers Literary Award and was published in the North Carolina Literary Review. Mildred teaches creative writing and literature here in our town, UNC Asheville, and at UNC Asheville, and serves on the boards of African Writers Trust and Story Parlor. And as I said earlier, Mildred coordinates the poetry reading events here at Malaprop's Bookstore and Cafe. And Mildred blogs at mildredbarya.com. So Mildred will be first, and then next will be Michael. Let me tell you a little bit, please, about Michael Hettich. Michael has lived around the country, several places, including Black Mountain here in North Carolina, where he now resides with his family. His PhD is from the University of Miami, and he taught many years at Miami-Dade College and was awarded an endowed teaching chair. His poetry, essays, and reviews have appeared widely in many journals and anthologies, and Michael has published more than 24 books of poetry across 5 decades. His latest collection, The Halo of Bees, New and Selected Poems, 1990 through 2022, was published by Press 53. He's had several honors, including the Individual Artist Fellowships from the from the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs, the Tampa Review Prize in Poetry, and a Florida Book Award, plus the Lena M. Shull Book Award from the North Carolina Poetry Society. His website is michaelhettich.com. And then finally, to round out our Poetrio this afternoon is Lee Stockdale. Lee's poetry has won the United Kingdom National Poetry Prize, the Sydney Library Poetry Prize, and others as well. His book, Gorilla, was published by Main Street Rag last year in August. He's a former Buncombe County representative for the North Carolina Writers Network. Thank you for doing that work, Lee. Appreciate that very much. And has led craft workshops at Isothermal Community College, just down the mountain, and Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, known locally as OLLI, at UNC Asheville. He initiated and coordinates a workshop at his church, Trinity Episcopal, here in downtown Asheville, and he received his MFA from Queen's University in Charlotte, right? Yes, good shot, Queen City, in 2017. And while there, he was selected by the Library of Congress to work in their rare book division on the St. Mark's in the Bowery Poetry Project audio recordings. He lives with his wife in the Western North Carolina mountains. And to find out more about Lee, go to leestockdale.com. It's my pleasure to begin Poetrio this afternoon with Mildred.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Malaprops, as always, for having us. I'm excited to read today because, as Patricia said, I'm usually introducing poets here, and so it feels a little strange to be here to read instead of introducing poets, but it also feels wonderful because I'm always excited about the poets who read here. I'm going to read 4 poems from this recent book, The Animals of My Earth School. And then I'll read two poems from my previous collection, Give Me Room to Move My Feet. And that will be all I will share with you. And if you want to read more, these books are available. And one of the things I'm concerned about, or at least when I was writing this book, is really the place of agency and what agency means to me as a person, as a human being, and what agency might look like when the perspective is from the animals, the different animals, the birds, the insects, the mammals, and the reptiles. The first poem is The World is Necessary, Even for Little Ants, and this is from the Insecta section. Digging mounds between a grove of pine, carrying piles of food larger than themselves, stocking up for winter. Do humans have the means to live differently? When my phone vibrates, a shot of long lines at food banks, not unlike the ones before me, is followed by my lover's text. Would you believe thousands of hungry civilians waiting for hours? My God, hard times. Nation crumbles at my feet, jaws open. Lord, grant us mercy, even if in small doses. Let us feed, clothe, and house all in need. Let us not be known as the people who withhold compassion instead of serving the greater good. I want to see goodness for you, for me, for all of us living creatures. In my old country, ants will strip a forest bare. Whatever it takes, patience grows, hard work, hard times, tireless labors, oh, how they travail, community-minded. Let us become ants to one another. My next poem is The Heart, the Hunger. I once had a blue wooden horse. Maybe it was brown. I carried the horse everywhere. I slept with that horse, fed it my love, gave it all the love it could never return. I called it mother horse and it broke me into crimson speckled fragments, insect-like. The smallest of hearts goes to the fairy fly. It lays its eggs in the eggs of other insects, parasitic wasp. You'd need a microscope to see its heart. The human heart is like that sometimes. Did you know that the Etruscan shrew is the living mammal with the smallest heart? It eats constantly, twice as much its body weight to not starve to death. I incline my ears to the little mammal. 1,200 to 1,500 heartbeats per minute. How fragile, tender, and tough. Cervix pygmy shrew, white-toothed pygmy shrew, carrying the weight of too many names, too many beats for a small heart. In cremation, I am told the heart is the last organ to burn, beat by beat. Thank you. This one is called Dazzling Wickedness, and everything in this poem happened. I sometimes have poems influenced by dreamscapes, and also I like, of course, in writing to let the imagination take over. But sometimes there's more fun, more fictional stuff in the real world. And when I write it, you know, it sounds like I've used the best of my imagination when I've only used basically my sense of sight. Dazzling Wickedness. One summer at a beach in Northern California, a raven stalked me. It was determined to have my tomato and cheese sandwich. Further up the shore was a large vaulted rock that I ran to. Before crawling inside, I turned and surveyed the coast, saw no raven in pursuit, then sat down. I enjoyed the breeze coming through the entrance and cooling my face. Just as I relaxed and took a bite into the juicy sandwich, the raven sprang into the space between my outstretched feet and eyeballed me. My tummy clenched in terror. What speed possessed me? I tore the sandwich and threw a chunk outside. Do not feed the animals. No, oh no. Concern for the raven's agency to fend for itself was nowhere near the charge for my safety. I could have lost an eye. The raven glared at what remained in my hand. Jesus. I tossed that too. And lastly, the backpack. The raven, I swear to God, tiptoed around me as if to make sure I wasn't hiding anything else, then spun violently and flew outside. Its unkindness so confounded me that long after I'd left the beach, I remained tormented by the dazzling wickedness of its powerful gaze. I'll read one from here, the first section, and then one from the last section. And this one is called Skipping. You will probably see bits of yourselves in this poem, or at least the subject it deals with is, I think, something that we've all experienced in our lives and will continue to experience. Skipping. People believe our Creator blesses other generations and skips theirs. Our parents were the blessed lot. They loved whole, married well. We others skipped. Our loves gone sour. Nations betrayed at our hands. Justice ripped from her seat. Where hearts should have been, we carry fragments. Everything we have touched has broken, is left unmended. We spin in unknown directions without destination, without occupation, without a country. At the final hour, the joy of the journey dries up. We are more troubled than before. We cannot tell in whose territory is favor. But once we've passed on like a discord in a song, those after us will think we were the chosen and they the skipped. One is called Waiting. It seems to me, waiting is the wheel we spin on. Get the right pair of boots, a song to last the night. The wick flickers, loyal to hope. Some things we've got to admit overstretch waiting. Babies born in camps grow to voting age without a memory of a night of peace. There are refugees trapped in a pause, like a coma in the wrong place, longing for a period of calm, a home, a future and a pathway at the intersection of hope. Between suspension and fulfillment, stagnancy threatens. The optimistic, fatalistic, pessimistic, cynic Lord, if it matters, matters not to hope. In the final transformational reel. Again, thank you so much for being here. And this is the last poem I'm sharing, and it's called The Hyena. We pride ourselves on possessing reason, a faculty believed to distinguish us from other animals, as if separation is a virtue, or the fact that this uniqueness slows us down. To hard think requires immediacy few possess. Mind like a spark, the way of the ancient warriors. Like a hyena, the samurai instantly knew what to do in the face of danger or pleasure. Eyes open, swiftness of action, no interval between tuning in or out. But we are modern. We scroll through piles of expert spreadsheets to enlighten us to the pros and cons of alliances, mortgages, Roth IRAs, traveling solo. We sift and sort until we stagnate. befuddled by a tangle of choices, the ego in the way. We know too well the torturous state of indecision and how to mask it with an intellectual haze that passes for philosophical investigation. Without clarity, we discard everything and start over, questioning thoughts and ideas as they trickle through language, curbing the instinctual tongue. To escape our fragmented and hollow selves, we dance naked, drink strong cocoa, trade stories and eat mushrooms around campfires of ceremonies that may return us to the laughing hyena state in which we once knew all that we needed to know. Females come first. Patriarchy is dead. Nothing else matters. In the kingdom of hyenas, the divine feminine reigns erect, adapts, takes chances, integrating feminine and masculine images, guided by familiar smells and sacred rituals. The hyena knows her primal place in the system of things, untouched by slander and misgivings. Likewise, we must retrace our sharpness and wholeness, not in science, but in the sounds and silences of our drum circles, leaving behind all doubt and misunderstandings. For what it's worth, I am told we are all gifted in equal measure because nature plays no favorites in the dominion of things. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you all for coming. It's an honor and a pleasure to read for you today. I also want to thank Malaprops and Mildred for organizing the Poetrio readings. And I also want to thank Mark Flowers, who's sitting in the second row here, for the beautiful artwork that became the cover for this book. And I also want to thank my grandsons, Owen, where is he? Owie, and Leo, both of whom came out here to hear me read, and it's really an honor to have them here. So this book is a new and selected poems going back to 1990. So I thought a good way to read from the book would be to read new poems and then go back to older ones and go back and forth that way, to just get a sense. I mean, for me as much as for you, to hear how the work maybe changes or resonates poem with poem. And I'm going to start off in a dentist's office and with a poem called "The Ache." We don't mean to come to the end of our lives before they come to us, but we do, she says, sitting beside me in the crowded waiting room, waiting to be called in. I nod as though I understand, which I do, but I don't say anything since my teeth have been aching. It's a small pain, of course, in the vast world of hurt, but distracting nonetheless. Since I'd rather be outside paying attention to the butterflies we see in this season, as of course I want to know which birds are flying south or north outside this office. I want to listen to their songs, as though by listening I might reverse the direction of extinctions harrowing our planet, though I know that's only a lazy man's dream. Now she's fiercely brushing her hair, grunting as she pulls. She shakes her head and smiles, getting strands of hair all over my sweater as everyone else stares at the TV or leafs through ancient magazines. And when she starts humming too loudly not to be trying to say something urgent, I look up from my phone. I forget myself and smile as though that were enough. Of course it's not, but she smiles back anyway. as though she were forgiving me, just as my name is called. And to go back a ways, and since Katie is here, my daughter Kaylin is here in the audience today, I thought I'd read a poem about being a parent that I wrote when she was about 8 years old. So actually, she was probably a little older than that, but it's a poem about when she was 8 years old. It's called The Parents. It goes like this. One morning, my wife and I followed our 8-year-old daughter along a crowded beach, just far enough behind her that she wasn't aware we followed, as she walked with her energetic stride, swinging her arms as though she were singing. We marveled at her independence, at her fearlessness. We compared her to other children we knew who would never have ventured so far with such self-confidence. We were congratulating ourselves on her excellent parenting skills, laughing proudly at her spirit, wondering where she was going with such lively determination when she stopped and turned to look back. She was crying with such deep heaves she could hardly breathe, desperately lost. She'd been frantically looking for us and the place we left our towels. She feared we'd forgotten her, gone home without her. What could we say, kneeling beside her in the bright sun? We'd been right there the whole time, behind her, laughing affectionately at the way she walked, as she walked the wrong direction to find us, at the way she looked from behind, as she searched for us, as she howled in such terror, we thought she was singing. This is the first poem in the book. It's called Core. The hawk in the white pine shivers, hunched into itself like a state of being we might think had vanished if we'd been playing too long with our gadgets or making arrangements to assure our perfect happiness sometime in the future. The wind that tossed cut down trees remains a ghost inside our furniture, like the antique notion of a soul. And ancient tides drew the swirls in the stones that line our paths. You went inside to nap and wander through the house. You cooked yourself a big meal, something you loved. And then you waited for the moon to rise full through the still afternoon. And that night you would carry out the saddles and reins, bits and blinders, or you'd walk out in your nightgown to ride your mother and father bareback until they remembered who they were by the feel of your small legs around them. Thank you. And then here's another one with a girl in it. The swan. That morning, a swan was caught in the ice, far out. A pack of dogs had gathered, yapping and teasing, keeping their distance, as the huge bird snapped at them, hissed and lunged, fell quiet a moment, then beat its huge white wings. Her dad lit a cigarette, took a sip from his thermos, slid out over the thinner ice, holding his arms out like a circus performer crossing the high wire, and shooed the dogs away. Then he crouched down and watched. And when the swan lay still, he walked back to where she waited, holding the line in the waning dark, leaning over the hole he'd chopped an hour earlier. They walked home at first light and woke up her mother, had a big breakfast and laughed that they hadn't caught anything as usual, but that didn't really matter. By evening, fresh snow had started to fall. It swirled and moaned while she lay in bed inside her own pale body and listened to her parents moving through the house, talking softly and turning off the lights, then lying down together in the darkness. My wife and I lived for many years in Florida. We moved there from Vermont. And when we first moved, we spent a lot of time in the Everglades, particularly when we first moved there. An amazing place. And we just we went out often, and this poem is a kind of a documentary poem of what we did when we, for the first year or so that we lived in Miami. I don't know if anybody realizes, but the Everglades is only about 25 miles outside the city, and it's empty, and so the city is full of people and teeming and crass and all that you think of as Miami, and 25 miles away, it's wilderness. So here we are, and the poem is called The Bullfrogs. When we first moved to Miami from Vermont, we were so happy to have left the cold that every time we went to the Everglades, every time we pulled off the road there, we had to take off our clothes for a swim in the black water, rejoicing at the sweet warmth. We delight in what we called the bullfrogs as we swam out their resonant croaks. We reveled at the sweet smells and balmy breezes as we floated on our backs to watch the buzzards circle. We marveled at the fact that so few people came out here to swim. The water smelled like flowers. For that whole first year, we had no idea those croaks we found so charming were actually challenges from bull alligators establishing their territory, calling anything in the immediate vicinity to make love or fight. And they were hungry too. We just swam out naked and happy. Then we got dressed and drove home through the dark along a 2-lane highway that was littered with the bodies of car-struck wild animals, vultures and opossums, turtles, snakes, raccoons. We hardly talked as we drove, relaxed and clean from our swimming. Sometimes you looked out the window as the dark fell. More often, you fell asleep beside me. A few more short ones. This one is a poem called Sky. Can you hear me? Am I okay, good. This poem's a poem called Sky. Don't think I need to say anything about it by way of introduction. Sky. Who took the chance to leave home with only the clothes she was wearing and someone else's name? Who took the chance to sleep without a blanket in the litter-filled woods by the highway in the rain? Who closed her eyes and slept while the delicate animals sniffed her and ravenous insects by the millions slipped under her skin as she mumbled a little in her dream? Did no one look for her? Someone walks barefoot through the city in the dark, a delicate woman with aching teeth whose bones have been arranged like kindling to burn. We wake to the smell of smoke and look up at the sky. Thank you. Something else. Suppose one spring the birds decided not to fly north and the animals sleeping in the woods decided this year they'd rather not wake and turned over instead for another dream. Imagine one summer the butterflies decided to stay in their cocoons, or the caterpillars forgot to wrap themselves up inside themselves and simply gorged themselves instead until their season passed. One day the tide forgot to rise. This is only one way of speaking for the world. Suppose the spiders stopped weaving, mosquitoes forgot how to suck our blood, bees decided not to pollinate flowers. Suppose the sea turtles never returned to the beaches that bore them to lay their moon-drawn eggs. Or suppose for a moment the rivers held still and the leaping salmon held still in midair. Imagine fire stopped burning things to ash, although it still burned. It was no longer hot. Of course that couldn't happen. So think of something else. And I'm going to end with a poem called Starting From, thank you. I'll end with the poem called Starting From Sleep. It's a short one. It goes like this. She tells me our bodies are nets dropped into the ocean. And when they are pulled up, the minnows are spilled out to flip-flop and strangle. And then we are tossed back over to dream. I talk, she says, to my great-great-grandchildren by treating all things with whatever compassion I've drawn from the grace I've been shown. And those children thank me and dream of being born. The wild parts of everything are disappearing everywhere. Wood grain, faint fingerprint, pores, eyes, blue breathing, wind, dust, mind, afternoon, tied lips, and sudden flowers. That's it. Thank you.
Great to be here at Malaprop's. When we moved, Gail and I, from Tryon, where we lived for 10 years, we moved 6 years ago, and my only criterion was how far is it from Malaprop's? So we are 19 minutes from Malaprop's. I'm going to read 5 poems. The first is called Are You Jackie Kennedy? And I just want to set that up. It's an experience that I had when I had dropped out of college. I was going to Antioch College and got out to get into therapy because my father had committed suicide, and I thought I needed to deal with that. And I wrote about this experience in my creative writing, in my poetry workshop. And it was my last semester at the University of Washington. And Sean Bentley, who was either the poetry editor or the journal editor, said, we got that poem, but since it didn't happen, we decided not to publish it. And I thought, well, it did happen, but I didn't want to, try to sort of, convince him. But the interesting thing was then I wrote this poem, which I'm about to read, and someone here in the community, a poet I really love and respect, read it and said, I like that poem, even if it didn't happen. So, but it's a very happy poem to me. I should explain. My father was a great friend of Jack Kennedy's. That's the cover of my book, Dad's Whispering in His Ear. People always ask me, what do you think he's saying? I don't know. He met Jack in the 40s. He was a great friend of his, confidant, served as his ambassador to Ireland, where I lived as a boy. And he took his life. My dad did 10 days after the assassination. This is called Are You Jackie Kennedy? I pick up my cab near the West Side docks, shoot into Midtown by my regular route, when 3 men flag me down for 70th and Park. I drop them off, and on the opposite corner, a woman I recognize raises her hand. She gives me an address on Central Park West. I know who it is, but ask, are you Jackie Kennedy? Yes, she says. Do you know who I am? No, I'm Grant Stockdale's son. How weird, she says, and leaning forward, you look just like your father. We talk for a while, then your voice, I tell her, is so soft, it's hard to hear you through this bulletproof glass. Yes, she says, pointing to the round holes we must talk through. They even look like bullet holes. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was a really interesting exchange. Okay, now I'll get back to the poem. I'm suddenly embarrassed to be driving a cab, the son of President Kennedy's ambassador to Ireland. I don't tell her I live next door to the Hells Angels and chase rock and roll poetry up East Village fire escapes. I'm taking time off from college. I don't really know what I want to be. Maybe a psychiatrist or an Episcopal priest. Oh, John and Caroline don't know what they want to do either. And just like that, she makes me feel like one of her kids. It's light chatter now. The city, February cold. She comes around, pays the fare at my window. If there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. She begins walking away, then turns back to give me the famous Jackie Kennedy smile. It really happened. And this, I'll let you decide. Unforeseen consequences of cremation. I am floating at the top of Bob Johnson's evening martini. A flake of me settles on splintered wood bleachers of the Polk County Little League baseball field. Some of me gets run over by the left rear tire of a Winnebago heading for the Cherokee National Forest. When I told my family I wanted to be cremated, my ashes poured into the Chocolate River, where my father taught me to fish, where I taught my 3 boys to fish. It never occurred to me my ashes might end up on the left rear tire of a Winnebago. As nothing guarantees your wind-borne particles won't be inhaled by a dog in the park or get caught in the hair of sunbathers as they talk in a roundabout way of marriage. He says he wants them. She says she does not, causing for the first time a realization of fundamental differences between them, so that later at Tryon's Side Street Pizza, stealing glances at each other over pepperoni, they must secretly wonder if their love is strong enough to bridge the chasm opening between them, like the Grand Canyon, to which part of me travels even now on the left rear tire of a Winnebago. And this is the title poem, Gorilla. I scale the Empire State Building to rescue the girl who will become my wife, but doesn't know it. She ignores that I'm a hairy gorilla with pecs as big as the Yankee infield. Because I am famished from scaling the building, I'm afraid I will eat her whole like an anchovy, since I don't bring silverware when I scale. It's all I can do to grab onto the gargoyles and swing. Sometimes I stick my big eye in an office window, but I don't eat her. Instead, she and I walk to Central Park, where we sit on a bench and I carve gorilla plus future wife in a heart. She says if it wasn't for Robert F. Kennedy in New York, they'd still be treating the mentally ill like animals, padlocked in cells with no air and no light, kept barely alive with food shoved through slots in the door by uniformed guards, never or rarely allowed to see family. I'm going to learn so much from her. I did want to say, Mildred, I love your poetry. It's just wonderful. And I heard Mildred talk in conversation with Tina Barr a couple of weeks ago. We had a discussion about bugs because I'm fascinated by bugs as well. And Michael, I know I was happy to hear and cheered that you went to the University of Miami because that's where my mother and father met. And so somehow I feel like I should be saying thank you, Michael. I don't know how that quite connects, but it's great to be here with both of you, really. Dante's eye bags. This morning I looked in the mirror to discover I have significant eye bags that snuck in over the years and gradually set up shop until they are now mature and grand enough to announce, hello, we're here. We are your eye bags. I want to hate them, except they make me look like Dante Fussell, the congressman from Miami, who beat my father in the Democratic primary in 1954, then held that seat for 40 years. In 1990, at a Homestead, Florida 4th of July parade, Dante and I sat in the VIP bleachers. He as a congressman, I as Homestead's National Guard commander. I introduced myself as my father's son, and Dante apologetically tried to explain the confusing politics that induced him at the last minute to enter the race and beat my father, who, before Dante jumped in, ran unopposed. I stopped listening, more interested in Dante's deeply jowled face, the eye bags that drooped like rippled sacks of flour from his lower eyelids onto his cheeks. So this morning, no, I do not hate my eye bags. They make me feel like I could beat my father in a Democratic primary for congressman from Miami. And like a bolt of lightning, I was called in February. Gail and I were sitting in the living room, and the lovely Judith Palmer from England called to say that I'd won the United Kingdom National Poetry Prize. And so I'm going to thank you. It was a real blessing. I could not be more grateful. So I will read the final poem that I'll read is My Dead Father's General Store in the Middle of a Desert. It has gas pumps with red horses and wings, but it's not merely a gas station. Your father is not my father. Standing over me with a clipboard, checking off things done and left undone. He seems happy at this last stop before death, for those living, before life, for those not yet born. Where his general store deals in flour, sugar, pieces of hacked meat or liver, reddish purple, a heart he wraps in brown paper. He cuts my hair beneath the tin awning. I must have gotten here from one direction or other on the road that stretches horizon to horizon, the desert heat shimmering my eyes into pools. I crawled in on my hands and knees. He handed me an ice cold orange knee-high drink. It's pure coincidence that this store is my father's. I asked him where all this stuff comes from, as no trucks travel this road to replenish merchandise no one buys. He doesn't like questions that challenge his existence. I become quiet. He's cutting my hair and might consciously or unconsciously make me look bad. You're doing a great job out here, I say, which he knows is bullshit. How many fathers, even if they're dead, set up a general store in a desert? I persist. You keep the shelves stocked, floor broomed, bathroom clean. The more I talk, the more I encourage myself to love him for the trouble he went to making all this seem real. With cans of various sized nails, beans, rice, shelves of liquor, deli section with giant pickles. I begin to see what a dear, sweet man he is. Is this because he is dead? I wish he were alive again. I don't think he killed himself to be mean to me personally. At night, he says, howling coyotes come down from the mountains and leave notes, Bible verses, threatening messages, love letters, everything a coyote wants to get off its chest. I ask if they come every night. He says, without fail. Thank you.
Well, thank you all poets for being here today and sharing your work with us. It's a pleasure to have you. We appreciate our live audience and our virtual audience. Now let's celebrate with conversation with the poets afterward, and we've got their works up at the register. Thanks for supporting independent bookstores and for being here today.